Hey, everybody, this is Tom Sega from Duluth Pack, and this is the Duluth Pack podcast, Leader of the Pack. Today's special guest is a true leader, and I also consider him a friend of mine. We've done some business together over the years, and he is definitely a mentor and has done extremely well in his fields of expertise. Our guest today is Bob Jacquart, the owner and CEO of Jacquart Fabric Products and Stormy Kromer. Welcome, Bob.
Hey, Tom. Thanks. It's great to be here. I've been excited about this ever since Andrea gave me a call and said it's going to happen. So this is fun.
I've been excited as well because you know what, you are a true mentor and a true leader, and this is called Leader of the Pack, and we are blessed to have you here. So let's jump right in, Bob, and just let's get some background on you personally. On where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? And then what were your plans out of school?
So I really haven't left Ironwood, Michigan since the day I was born. It's funny. I filled out an application one time for the federal government to do something, and they had like 16 pages of all my different places of living, and I only had 3, from my parents' home to the first home I was married in to the second home Denise and I built. I live a very boring life other than going to college for a few years. So I grew up and raised and live and die by being part of the Ironwood, Michigan community, which is everybody should probably look at a map and see where Ironwood is and know why Tom and I are friends, because we're less than 2 hours apart, 2 states away. And so it's pretty interesting.
So we both live about 150 miles north of the Arctic Circle to most people.
Yeah, exactly. And I live in Michigan, further west than St. Louis, Missouri. So that'll get everybody thinking about how on earth does that happen. So
that is very true. And you also live north of about 70% of the population of Canada.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so I started my career in college in mechanical engineering. And that's what I was my vision of being eventually, initially, until I kind of really realized that at that time, the school I was going to really was sending everybody down to the auto industry. And I couldn't see myself leaving the UP of Michigan and working in Detroit. And so I took a time out with life. My dad had a little tailor shop. My dad had this part-time little sewing business. And I took what I thought was going to be a semester off to figure out what I wanted to do. And I kind of been here ever since.
And what was your dad doing in the shop? And you changed the name of it at some point. We'll get into that. But what was the name of the shop then? And what exactly was the specialty?
So the business was started from my father, who was a 24-hour fireman. So he worked 24-hour shifts from 7 in the morning on Monday to 7 in the morning on Tuesday. And then he had all day Tuesday off until he went to work at 7 in the morning on Wednesday. And so on those days off, he started sewing in our basement of our home. So I can remember my dad sewing in our basement. And then he moved to his father's neighborhood grocery store while he was still a full-time fireman. So Evelyn was his one employee, and he would work on his days off at the fire hall. And he was in a little neighborhood grocery store plucking away at things, and he was making bank deposit bags, and he had a Singer 111W. If you know sewing enough, you know sewing machines, and you remember them by model numbers and all that fun stuff. And it was heavy enough to do repairs, so he was doing like truck tarp repairs and boat cover repairs. Didn't really have a full line of things except bank deposit bags, and was making some shopping bags at the time, and just little things, just a little quaint little place to make things.
So I'm assuming his nickname was Moneybags then.
Yeah, no, not quite. And my dad was a very quiet, wonderful, humble man who actually finished the Catholic seminary. Finished everything but taking his vows, and my sister are very happy that he did not become a priest. We wouldn't be here today. So, but my dad was just an awesome, quiet, humble man that just loved life and loved to work. And so that's what he had started.
And so at 19 years old, you started working with him or for him? How did that work?
Well, my dad, I had a lot of energy and I started picking up on this thing, and he kind of let me manage it almost right out of the blocks. And what had happened was, and this is, lessons to be learned, right? Academically, I was very good academically. I actually had a full ride scholarship to school. I was a good math student. And so that's where the school system sent me down the engineering path, which was, kind of logical, except at the time you couldn't be on a, university track with all that math and take shop classes at the same time. I should have taken shop classes. I realized when I started putzing at my dad's place that I loved to fabricate things out of fabric. I love that whole thing about scissors and pattern making and drawings and engineering and fitting and all that stuff. And I hadn't known that until I was taking this supposed 6 months off to figure out where I was going to finish at college. And I was just fascinated by that. And then what ended up happening was I graduated from high school at 117 pounds. So I'm a little tiny person, but I was a good enough distance runner to be a good enough athlete that I don't know. I think my work ethic was above average in being a distance runner, and people picked up on that. And so somebody came 30 miles away one day and said, we're doing a modular home business and we're starting a modular home business and we want an effect on the community and we need tarps. And basically he said to me, have you ever made tarps? And I said, no, my dad has repaired them, but we've never made them. And he said to me, if you put as much energy making these tarps as you did on the basketball court and on the track, you can have this business. And that one account doubled my dad's business in 1 year. So we started making truck tarps, and we're still in fact, our factory is making truck tarps today. So we got started in that business, and that was a really nice start for us.
And what year was that, Bob?
I would have been 1972. And then we were repairing boat covers, and making a boat cover is really a difficult thing to do because there's no real measuring. It's all fitting. It's fitting a boat cover on a boat or on a frame or a bimini on a sailboat. And I told myself maybe I should try doing that, and I got really good at that, and that became a good part of it. And what ended up happening was, we're trying to teach people lessons and also tell people how valuable they are. Ironwood sits 40 miles north of the resort land of Wisconsin. So Manitowish Waters, Minocqua, Eagle River, Boulder Junction, those wonderful places with somewhat of the wealth of Madison and northern Chicago and Milwaukee come up to these places. And so here I am, the son of a city of Ironwood worker, don't have much. I live in an $8,000 home, but I'm good at making boat covers. And what you don't realize is somebody that's got a summer home, they get tired of calling the electrician and the plumber and the tree cutter and not having them show up on time and do a really good job. Everybody that's got a second home knows this story, except this eager 20-year-old, 21-year-old boat cover maker did a really nice job and always showed up on time. And Tom, I don't even know if you know this story, but you know that both of my daughters are in this business, and one of the things that I wanted was my daughters to be good with adults. So we had this deal that one of them would come with me on these pickups and deliveries of these boat covers, and the deal was they could stay in the car and listen to music, or if they came in and saw Mrs. Johnson or Mr. Johnson and looked them square in the eye at age 4 and shook their hand firmly and said, "Nice to meet you," we would stop for ice cream on the way home. And that, honestly, that was the deal. And I didn't care. They could listen to music in the car and not come in if they felt shy today. But if they came in, we would stop for ice cream. Well, they got really good at it. And the next thing you know, here I am, and Al McNichol, who is the former CEO of Allstate Insurance Company, he's a Chris Craft boat owner, and he would be happy that I'm using his name. He's just a dear man. But he'll tell you, I walked in there as a 21-year-old, and I just couldn't believe, how could somebody do this wonderful second home and, have such a beautiful second home and have enough wealth or whatever, enough money to do this and have such a wonderful life. And at the same time, he respected me so much that next thing I know, I'm sitting at his kitchen table having coffee with him, and he's mentoring me. So here I am, this, nothing person from Ironwood that lives in an $8,000 home. And I think that was when I was driving the $70 pickup truck. And I'm being treated as an equal by this man who's got more wealth and elegance than I ever dreamed that I would ever know. And then he tells his next door neighbor, and he tells his next door neighbor, and the next thing you know, I'm the popular guy down there being treated by all these guys and being mentored. And I asked a lot of questions back then, so that was kind of my wonderful beginning. It was that access to those people and being mentored by them.
You must have learned amazing lessons and heard amazing stories. And generally, I would assume these people had a lot of experience and wisdom, and they would share a lot of their stories of maybe failures as well as successes with you.
Yeah, exactly. And what if you're really honest and you really ask somebody that, for advice or what would you do in this case, and they really know that you mean it. And I always said that my tail was always wagging, what can I learn from you next? What have you got? What have you got? Come on, can I learn? They pick up on that, and I pick them. And honestly, I've had some amazing conversations with amazing people. And like right now, I'm being open and honest. And I found that, exposing yourself is the key to getting to somebody's heart. I mean, if you expose yourself and say that I've made these mistakes and I've done these silly things, there's something about that really opens people up. And then there's one more part about that time of my life that I always like to tell people, Tom, and that is when I first started making boat covers, just a little bit before sitting in Al McNichol's living room, somebody drove 40 miles to get a boat cover made for me. And to me, that was like freaking utopia. Like somebody drove 40 miles to do business with me. Okay. And I remember that feeling. Okay. Well, then 25 or 30 years later, I'm reading Yvon Chouinard's book on Patagonia. Okay. Now he's just a slight bit older than I am. Okay. And unless you read his book, you wouldn't know this, but here he is, a 20-year-old starting this business. He picked the word Patagonia because Patagonia is pronounced exactly the same in every language in the world. There's no translation. It's Patagonia. So here's Yvon starting his business at age 20, and he's got this world vision, and Bob's isn't even 40 miles around Ironwood. I couldn't believe when somebody came 40 miles and Yvon's ready to go to Turkey. It's like, whoa.
Well, I think we all pronounce Stormy Kromer. So I think you've hit that pinnacle, Bob.
It took me a lot longer than Yvon, though. That's for sure.
You know what? But I think, you think about this and the quality of life and the standard of life and the life you want to live where you live. You mentioned that you've lived in 3 homes in your life in Ironwood, Michigan, but that's you, that's who you are. And, forget about wealth. That's wealth, being happy and doing what you love to do and being where you love to be and with family like you do, Bob. And I'm sharing some things probably because I know you, much better than our listeners would, but to you, that's also, it's got to be wealth.
Yeah, and it really is. And it's really interesting because I was explaining this story to, fortunate actually the university that I didn't finish about 40 years later, I got asked by the governor to serve on its board of trustees. And while I was on that board of trustees, I met this amazing young lady from Ghana, who was a graduate student. And she's just amazing, just absolutely amazing. She ended up learning how to use our satellites and for global imaging. And she's a geological engineer, so she's studying the world of geology through it. And give you an idea where she was in the world of smart. She was a summer intern for NASA, 1,700 interns, and she was picked as the #1 intern. If you can imagine what that competition was. And she's now going to work for Microsoft. I just talked to her actually yesterday, and here's this girl that's been around the world. She's from Ghana. Her parents put her on a plane in Ghana, and she ended up in Michigan, going to school here for her graduate studies. And I'm telling her, she says, "Why did you stay in Ironwood?" Now she lived in 5 towns since she's graduated, she got her PhD. And I said, I watched this movie when I was in my 20s called It's a Wonderful Life. And George Bailey had an effect on the community that he didn't realize until he had a tragedy. And I've modeled my life after, I have that ability. This is my hometown. And I've kind of modeled I have that ability to model my life after that because I've been here, and and every year that goes on, I seem to have more and more of an effect on this community, which has kind of been my driving force. And I'd like, if something happened here, I'd like my angel Clarence to show me how, what exactly what an effect I really did have in the community. So that's an advantage of being here in your hometown all this time. So.
Bob, but you as a human being, and I guess I'll jump on this one, is you as a wonderful human being would have an effect anywhere you are, not just Ironwood, Michigan. And the people of Ironwood, Michigan are just very fortunate that a person of character and a person like Bob Jacquart chose to stay there and make his career there and raise his family there. So those people are very, very lucky and blessed to have you there. And I can say that as a friend and a person who knows you and the character of who you are.
Well, thanks. I really hope I am, and I do. So.
Well, there's no question there. And folks, our special guest today is Bob Jacquart, President and CEO of and owner of Jacquart Fabric Products, and Stormy Kromer, the legendary Stormy Kromer. Let's move along because we want to talk about some of your companies as well, Bob. So as you have progressed, in 1983, if I remember correctly, you purchased the company from your father.
Yes.
And you're doing the boat covers, and you made a little bit of a name shift, but it's still... It's Jacquart Fabric Products.
Yep. And the simple strategy for my dad was smart enough he was a fireman working for working as a civil servant. So he wasn't paying into Social Security. So he needed 40 quarters of payment into Social Security. He hadn't made a profit until I got there. And so the first year I had it, when that big tarp orders, when we got that big tarp customer, he started making money. And so we made an agreement that the business would stay in his name. So any profits that came into the name for the next 40 quarters would go into his name so that he could get a little bit of Social Security out of that, along with his civil service pension. So that was the big business strategy on that, and then we had the business appraised, and I paid full dollar for it and bought it from him and took over. And about the same time, Tom, as we were Bob, I was thinking that it was 3 or 4 employees, and mainly Bob, the canvas worker. And so that's kind of what we were heading for until I was between you and I. For a lot of the people, there's a group of islands called the Apostle Islands. And I was, of course, the boat cover maker for those folks there as well. And that was Saturday nights. That's when Denise, my wife, and I would go up and we would measure covers, because I couldn't afford to leave work during the day. So we would go there. And if it was a big enough job, we would stop at the steak pit and have dinner at the steak pit. But if it was a small job, we would stop for hamburgers somewhere. So
the good old days.
It's our big Saturday night out. And I was working on a 3-masted 38-foot sailboat. And the gentleman said, have you ever done a lot of production work? And I said, no, not really. But I'd really like to someday. And he said, well, I'd like to work with you on a project. So we started, I started doing production work using women in their homes at first, because I did not really understand how I could make it work with an assembly line and people and stuff like that. So we were making orthopedic pillows for a physical therapy supply catalog. And I was very proud of that at the time, because I was employing 6 people, ladies, and they were able to make these little things at home pretty easily. But they were making really a good wage while the brownies were baking and the babies were sleeping. And they just loved that they didn't have, what a convenient way to make a living. They still think, it's the good old days, but they still think very highly of our company for being able to do that. So started doing that. And then we started, you talk about, here we are, both of us in the sewing business, right? And I didn't have a brand back then other than my, family name or whatever. And here I am thinking I can survive in the sewing business in the United States. When you think about that, I can't imagine. I don't know why somebody didn't stop me. It's just bizarre that I could, not only in the sewing business, but in rural America in the United States. And so what the combination that helped us grow, Tom, would be the fact that we were very craftsmen. We were all craftsmen. So we loved creating and starting new projects. So we didn't have a niche. We didn't say we only make bags, or we only make shoes, or we only make sleeping bags, or we only make shirts. We said, let's try it. Let's try to make it. And let's find the stuff that China can't make. So that's what we became as a contractor, was what are the things that China can't do? What are the delivery models? Maybe somebody needs, like we've got one customer right now that's got 60 SKUs of covers, and they need like they order a lot of them, but they need a 5-day turnaround. Well, China can't do a 5-day turnaround. They can, they just can't do that. And then we've done some Made in America projects, and we made 800 gun cases a day for a while. We made products for a major sock. We sold a product line for a major sock company for a really long time. We've done some really odd things. And then we got involved with the wonderful folks at Doctors Foster and Smith, a pet supply company that lasted for about 35 years and then sold. And we ended up making tons and tons and tons of dog beds for them. And that partnership was really strong for us. And it really gave us a sense of what a true business partnership can be, and what they cared as much about us as we cared about them. And it was just really those 2 guys that started that, Race Foster and Marty Smith, just spectacular human beings. And we were really truly partners in working together. And so while we were doing that, we're making all kinds of other things, covers and all those types of things. So, and just finding the things that China can't make. The problem with being a contractor is you're at the whim of somebody else. It could be nothing you did and the business just goes away. Like we were making, I'm not going to use a name, but we were making a product for a very large company, and they allowed 2 defects per 1,000. Okay, so you were allowed to send them 998 good ones and 2 bad ones, and they wouldn't even put you on their radar. And they sent somebody up here. We were on a string of 60,800 pieces with 0 defects. And this guy sat in our conference room. He was, honest to gosh, he was crying, saying, I can't believe they sent me up here to do this, but we're taking this business to Mexico. And it was a couple of $1 million worth of business to our company that had a huge effect. And whammo, out goes that business. We had nothing to do with it. We were flawless in our delivery. We made everything perfect for them. We cared about them. But somebody at corporate made a decision. And that's happened to us 3 times where we've lost a lot of little customers, but 3 big ones have really walloped us. And then you're just kind of stunned with how that happens. So
Bob, what is the best lessons that our listeners can learn if they're thinking about going into business or if they're in business from those types of interactions that you had, that it's no doing of your own, it's some corporate somewhere making a decision, and it's taking a wallop, like you said, into your business model.
Yeah, Tom, it's an interesting dynamic because they start out small and they love you and they say, "Give me more," and they love you more, and they're not, you know, we just went through some exercises with a consultant, and we've had a lot of people come in here as consultants, but this guy said, divide your businesses and grade them 1 through 10. And the ones and twos are the ones that are your partners. And when you have a price increase, they talk to you and they're open. And if there's a problem, they help you solve it together. And the 8, 9s, and 10s are the ones that are always looking for the better price, and they're always nagging about something, and they're always, you get the picture. And they're basically saying, throw out the 8, 9s, and 10s, get rid of them all, and keep the 1s and 2s. Well, then you get these 1s and 2s that are really good to you. And, like this pet supply company, they sold the business, and they did everything they could to keep us in that line, but the new owners didn't want to do that. And so they were a 1 and 2, the business. They paid us full price for everything. They never pushed back. They were just great partners. And then they sold. So I guess but what was hard for me to figure out, and I didn't figure it out with a couple of them, was your bank's telling you never let anybody get too big of a piece of your pie. And I kept going back to them. Well, right now they're 2% of the business. Next year they're 4% of the business. Next year they're 10% of the business, and they keep growing, and you're so dang profitable from them, and it's so wonderful to work with them, and you love being in the brainstorming sessions with them, and being in the creativity sessions with them. And now the next thing you know, they're 30% of your business because they're growing so well, and you're growing with them, and everything's good until everything's not good.
And you're supposed to tell them, no, you know what, we're 20% now. We don't want to get any bigger than you. I guess find me it's someone who's going to actually have that conversation.
And I don't have a lesson to be learned, except for the fact that what saved us was our balance sheet. And for anybody that is or isn't in business, the balance sheet is what you have, what you have, and not what you have from this year, but what you have from the past. And our family, and one of the, and here's another interesting little fact about Ironwood. I have a lot of friends from the Twin Cities. And for them, when they come up, it's just, they live in an environment, and wherever you come from, come from somewhere, everything that they wear has to have a brand name on it. That you can see by the cars they buy, they have to have, and it's all about the Joneses or the neighbors and all of that stuff. Okay. And one of the cool things about living in this little town is we don't have any Joneses. And we are so lucky that, I can go and have coffee with a guy that works for the city of Ironwood, and he remembers me from high school. And it's not like I'm not going to sit with you because your checkbook balance isn't the same as mine. We're, the same God-born human beings. And so there's not this pressure from, on our wives and on ourselves to keep buying and buying and owning and owning and owning. So our families living in this climate, we live a much more relaxed life. And thus we've kept a lot of money in our balance sheet and kept the business. I mean, that's like the roots and the base of the company. And so when you have these storms, the balance sheet's what protects you and keeps you in balance. So that's just kind of one of the philosophies that we've had. It's never like the company's never bought me a boat or a snowmobile. So that's just the way we decided to do it, that we would live off of the means that we projected at the beginning of the year, and the profits would stay in the business and go back into purchasing equipment and buying down loans and all that fun stuff. So, but again, we don't have those. I see my friends, the pressure, you can just feel the pressure they have on going back and pulling into the cul-de-sac and having to look like this and be like this. And we don't have to do that. And I find that is very, very fortunate.
That, Bob, is such a lesson for people, not only life, but for business, is that what really matters and what is really important at the end of the day, when you put your head on the pillow, and what's important for us to get up tomorrow, and you have all of your stars, they're so aligned, and that's why you've always been a mentor to me, and I've always probably badgered you with 5,000 questions every time we're around each other, is because you have so much wisdom that you can give to all of us from the same person that just gave that great wisdom and that great information to us that you just did. Bob, looking forward before we get to 2001 and you being in a coffee shop and what happened there, what are some of the goals, or what's the vision for Jacquart in the future?
Like right now for Jacquart Fabric Products, it's to stay a contract business, but only work with really great people. And, I had an opportunity in the early 90s to work with some shady people who had a spectacular business plan. I mean, the business plan was irrefutable. I mean, it was just fantastic. And if I started giving details, it would just, line somebody up with names, and I don't want to do that. But we were making a new product, and it's really interesting. The business model has actually been written about. What happened to us actually was written about. We were trying to get a product. This is before the internet, but we were trying to get a product into grocery stores. And the big competitor that was against us was buying everything. They were sending people into stores buying everything. They just purchased everything so the consumer never got the product that we made. It was purchased by the big monster customer that didn't want us penetrating. And they couldn't crack the nut because the consumer never got the product. We made 1 million of this product, like 900,000. And the big competitor just bought everything we sold. And so when push got the shove, the slime balls got ugly. And, the business plan, I mean, it should have made money, but nobody could see this happening, that the competitors would be just buying everything, would have enough money to do something like that. But the people involved got squirrely, and then all of a sudden it was look out for themselves. So the vision right now is no more slime balls. I mean, I don't care how shady, whatever, how good the business plan is. I'm going to know more about you as a human being. And I didn't know what kind of people they were until after I got started, but I will do a lot more due diligence on people in a company now, just to make sure they're good people. And like right now, our partners are phenomenal. They're just wonderful. We've got 5 major contract customers right now that are just really, really, really special. And I brought Gina in on a conversation, Gina being my oldest daughter, who's about to take over as the president and the CEO of Stormy Kromer and the whole business. But we just kind of, I wish it was a little further along, but we just kind of verbally talked about a real cool co-branding opportunity with one of our customers that's going to be really fun. And we're really, really excited about it. But that's what, to work with a partner that someday becomes, work with a customer who someday becomes a partner is really pretty special. So that's kind of who we are. I want to keep these creative juices going. And the other thing about contract work, Tom, and you would know this from your business, is making some of these industrial flat tarps is just such good sewing education for people. I mean, you can put somebody on their first day and they could be making some of these industrial products where you can't, if somebody doesn't know how to sew, it takes them a long time to learn how to make a Stormy Kromer hat. So.
Absolutely. And let's segue into that. Great information on Jacquart Fabric Products and how that came to be what it is today and what the future is, Bob. Thank you for sharing that. Let's talk about 2001. You're in a coffee shop. having a cup of coffee and this whole Stormy Kromer thing comes up. Can you tell us about it? Because what a story and what a company.
Yeah, and so I'm going to start by saying, Tom, that I've told this story, many times, and oftentimes after tours, somebody will say, this is really cool, and I say, well, I'm really lucky, that this just happened, because what I'm about to tell you seems like luck to me. Okay, and this man said, that's not luck, that's pluck. And he said, opportunities go by everybody every day, and if only the right people are smart enough to grab at them. So we call that plucky, not lucky. So I'm plucky, not lucky, but I still think this is lucky. So anyway.
I think if people want to call it luck, I think you also create your own luck.
Yeah,
you put yourself in a position, and that's, I think you're plucky that you're talking about.
Yeah, so that's what. Yeah, you're great. So I wore a Stormy Kromer hat. It was actually called a Kromer cap back then, and I wore a hat, so I certainly knew what it was, and I wore one out, so I've purchased two in my adult life up until then. And the local dealer came into the coffee shop when I was there and came over to me and said, I hardly knew him at the time. We just, we were acquaintances and would say hi to each other. And he came up to me and he put his finger he started shaking his finger in my face and said, they quit making Kromer caps. You better do something about it. And I go, what? I smiled and I said, what are you saying? And he said, I called in my summer order for hats and they told me they discontinued them. And I said, Mark, get me the number, I'll buy the dang company. And I remember when that sentence came out of my mouth, I remember saying to myself, yeah, right, Bob, like you'd own that company someday. I mean, I just distinctly remember that. So that afternoon, I was out on the plant floor and I came back to the chair I'm sitting in right now. And there's a little slip of paper and it says the Kromer Cap Company and the phone number. So I just picked up the phone. This is 2 hours, think about it. You think about these great leaders and there's this picture of them on the mountaintop, with their hand under their chin and their other finger pointing in a direction saying, we will go there. And, I will lead you to that summit over there. And here's Bob, saying, 2 hours later, let's give this a shot, So I called Dick Grossman, who I found out later bought the business from Stormy Kromer. So I happen to be the third owner of this wonderful 1903 company. And I said, I own a sewing business in the UP and I hear your hats not making the hats anymore. I'm interested. And he said, I'm sorry, but there's nothing here. And it turned out that the two largest dealers were in Ironwood and in Bessemer, which is 7 miles away or 8 miles away. And so I'm living in the epicenter of the Kromer Cap Company market. And he said, the biggest territory in our whole area is a 20-mile radius from where you're sitting, and you're not going to sell any more hats than in Ironwood. And I, that's okay. I still like to talk to you about it. So, very shortly after I drove down there and long story that we don't have time for, I got involved with a company and I was able to help a company that was threatening a strike. And I was able to be the kind of a mediator that really worked, and it really worked well for everybody. And after it was all done, one of the attorneys put his arm around me and said, you were really helpful and you really saved this organization and you should be very proud of yourself, blah, blah, blah. But he says, but do me a favor. If you ever negotiate something, if you ever need to buy something or negotiate it, don't you ever do it yourself. You just talk too much. And so now here I am driving down to Milwaukee, wanting to buy the Kromer Cap Company, remembering Dennis telling me this thing, this story about, I talk too much and I say too much. I don't, I'm an open book and I'm supposed to be down here negotiating. So I sit down with Dick and I said, Dick, I got this friend up north that told me that, I really shouldn't be negotiating anything. And I was trying to think how I could do this best. And I said, the best way it would work for me is, could we just talk like we've been friends for 20 years? That's how I started the conversation. And I'll never forget, he coupled his hands together on his chest, and his shoulders went from horizontal to slouched, and he relaxed in his chair and he said, "That would be nice." So we talked for a couple hours and kind of started shaking hands and on things. And I went back and put an agreement together. Interesting thing is, it's a document that I made. This transaction happened without attorneys. No offense to any attorney, but I'm kind of proud of the fact that that's how small town, hometown this business is. And so I brought the business back up here. We signed the deal, interesting, on the anniversary of Stormy Kromer's death on November 23rd, 2001. And and there's been all kinds of eerie kind of, I don't know, wonderful stories that have come from that. And so I'll just keep going and tell you what happened right at the beginning. This is right at the beginning. And then there's a lesson. We're running out of time, so I'll go quickly here. But I thought it was going to stay small like it did. And I had no idea, except two local people came to me. And one lady came to me and said, "Are Kromer caps really made in my hometown?" And I said, "Yeah, they're made. I'm making them in the factory." And she pulled out a picture of a pet grave marker. And she showed me this photo of a little cross in the grass. And this is the grave marker where my husband Dave's Kromer cap is buried on Isle Royal. And I go, "What?" And she says, "Yeah, after, he always wore a red hat." And I said, "Yeah." And she said, after his funeral, his fishing buddies called the U.S. Park Service and got legal permission to bury a hat on his favorite fishing point. So there's a Kromer cap buried on Isle Royal, and somebody took a picture of it last June, and this is like 2002.
This is a national park.
Yeah, and they've got national, permission to do this, and it's like, wow, is there something more special to this hat than I saw? And then another neighborhood father came to me and said, "I went to a dance in 1947, and everybody, if you understand 1947, nobody wore bright clothes back then. So I decided that I would wear my red Kromer cap to the dance floor." And he says, "I got on the dance floor, and four of the cutest girls I ever met wanted to meet the daring guy who wore the bright color to the dance." And so he then met his wife because of his red Kromer cap. And so now I realized that there's more to this business than I could imagine. This hat has stories and making stories every day.
Can you, Bob, explain to people how Ida Kromer and why Ida Kromer made the first Stormy Kromer, and maybe a short little background about Stormy himself?
Well, Stormy was a railroad engineer, and his job was to make sure the wheels were greased on the railroad engine, and that oftentimes required you to stick your head out the window, a long way out of the window, to make sure that you could see which wheel was skipping when there was a squeal, and then stop the train and then go grease that wheel. And if there was a sunny day out and it was cold, there was no hat with ear flaps and a brim made then. So that was kind of the genesis for this thing. So he asked his wife to put ear flaps on a baseball hat, and they modified it a little bit, and then he wore it to work the next day. And some guys at the railroad asked for more, and then asked for more, and asked for more, and asked for more, and that's how the business got started, was from him needing that. The necessity is the mother of invention, sort of. So, yeah, and then it just kind of evolved. But it was a very small business for 98 years, and the hat lasted forever. So the longevity of that length of time created tons of stories. Like, there's hundreds and hundreds of stories, and we know of over 50 people who have been buried in hats. I bought a new hat, put it on my dad, kissed his forehead, closed the casket. A friend of mine called me from Shawano, Wisconsin, and told me that story. And now we're doing gender reveals and baby births, and it's just the coolest dang thing. So anyway, one lesson is, because I didn't finish college, I've mentally always thought that I need to keep learning. I got to catch up to those guys that have a college education. And I've been told oftentimes that that's been a slight advantage to me because I've never stopped learning and this company's never stopped learning. And so when I had this opportunity, when I heard these two stories about the hat being buried and the red hat going to the dance, I figured, okay, there's more to this. I'm going to go learn. So I went down back to Milwaukee where I bought it from, and I asked agencies for help. And I remember the agency I picked saying, "You don't have a clue what you've got here." And it's all this history and this black and white pictures and stuff. So we leveraged that.
Diamond in the rough.
Yeah, we leveraged all these pictures, and they managed to get a front page, an article in the Milwaukee Journal in the front page of the Sunday paper one day. And it's just been kind of, and now we're just kind of moving in this direction of niche, quality, made in America, the passions of UP at work ethic and the up north work ethic, like you and I, both of our companies have. And really, if either one of our companies was in Miami with the same families running it, with the same business energy, it just wouldn't work. There's just something about up north that makes it sound more rugged and more tough and durable and long lasting.
And you've expanded from not only the Stormy Kromer caps, but the awesome vests and a lot of other products. Can you explain that quickly to us?
Yeah, so we had hats. They were selling like crazy, but there wasn't enough to fill a display at a store. So our reps that were selling said, "We've got to have more product." Right now, the hats are over there with the scarves and the miscellaneous things over there on that side shelf with somebody else's mittens and somebody else's scarves and somebody else's this and that. And we need a product line. So we brought in a 64-year-old man whose varsity jacket business in St. Louis got taken over to Asia, and he didn't want to quit. So Herb came to work for us and taught us how to make coats. It was just awesome. So we started making coats and vests from learning from him. And again, we're craftsmen just learning how to make anything. We never made a hat before. We never made a vest before. We never made a coat before. But we just keep figuring this stuff out. And the line's gotten bigger and bigger. And we've got our mitten line is going like crazy. And we just we took some of the knowledge we have from making a fuzzy, furry dog bed, and it turns out to be really great lining for mittens. And so we've got these warm mittens that we just make all kinds of sizes and styles now. So it just keeps branching and moving and going forward.
And I can tell you it's American made quality, folks. It is awesome products. I did a count, Bob. I have 7 Stormy Kromer caps. I have a vest, which I have a picture in my office of you and myself with us both wearing our vests.
Yeah.
I have a pair of mittens. So it's all good, folks.
Yeah. So we're, it's very blessed. And now it's going to pass on to a next generation like you have, Tom. And how much more endearing can that be? How much more? And you're looking for words of advice. I started working with family business transition counselors about 15 years ago. So it's going to happen flawlessly, but I've been working on it for 15 years because not on my watch is something going to happen to my family because of this stupid business. I will not let that happen. Let's be clear. And so we've had great counsel, and I would recommend any family business to find someone with that expertise that can help you through the dynamics of turkey dinners and business problems.
And folks, I will tell you, Bob means that from the core when he talks about family business, because I have learned personally many, many lessons from Bob because I'm in small business. I have family involved in both of my businesses. And from Bob's advice, we have had rules, like Bob just said, at Thanksgiving dinner, we are not going to be arguing about business or debating about business. There is family and there is business, and we don't mix the two. And I learned that directly from this gentleman, folks, that you do not mix those two. You have separate lives in those two, because that is important, because as we all know, family comes first. These businesses have been here long before us. They'll be here long after us, but family is where it's at. And Bob, you really hammered that home for me. And I thank you and I appreciate that you did that for your family. And to be honest, you've also helped do that for my family.
Well, that's awesome. That's good. But I would give that advice to anybody because the advice has helped us a lot to keep it in perspective. And like I said, I want both my daughters and my wife to be holding my hand at my deathbed, not one of them ticked off at me because of some stupid thing that happened at work.
Exactly.
Imagine, and I got a whole bunch of money in my checking account, but no daughter at my bedside. Yeah, that's right. That's what I want for sure.
And I'm sure people have been through it many, many times. Families have been through that, and I know you don't want to be part of that. So you have what is most important, and your priorities align very well.
Very blessed. Yes, sir.
Bob, can we segue again? And we're going to get all the handles so people can go and see these awesome Stormy Kromer products, these awesome things that Jacquart Fabric Products do. But in later years of your career here, you've become quite a philanthropist, if you will, and you've given back to so many things. You talked about the universities. Can you tell us a little bit about the United States of America men's and women's ski jumping team and the Copper Peak ski flying, and how you're involved in all of that? It's a great story.
So Ironwood has a very large ski jump just about 7 miles north of where I'm sitting. It was built in 1970 and it's been here, and it's kind of a monument to ski jumping. Except there hasn't been a jumping meet here since 1994. And in 2013, the director of international ski jumping said, we want to bring ski jumping back to the big jumps in the United States, and we want to go jump in Copper Peak. So they sent a delegation here. I didn't know anything about it, except one of the people in the delegation was one of the guys that jumped in the 1976 Olympics and worked with Wide World of Sports, actually supplied my company with foam rubber. So we knew each other from a different life. And so I got involved and saw this great opportunity. And I've worked tirelessly for 8 years for my community to try to get this thing back up and running. Copper Peak is the name of the ski jump. And just if you Copper and Peak together, you can go on their website and see how big and beautiful it is. There's some beautiful drone pictures of it. And you can actually take a ride up to the top of it if you come here. I'm working with the state of Michigan right now for a grant to get us refurbished. I got a letter from FIS, which is the international body, basically the NFL of ski jumping. And it says, if you build it, we will come. And we just got that about a month ago. And they want to come here so badly. And it's ski jumping is Europe's #1 TV watched winter sport. It's their football. It's their summer football. They soccer in the summer and ski jumping in the winter. And that sport doesn't come to the United States right now at the World Cup level. And they want to come here and put on many meets a year. And by a quirk for all the ladies living, it's about to become the largest legal ski jumping hill that a woman can jump on. And if we can pull this funding off, Ironwood would then have the women's world record of ski jumping at it, because it's the biggest hill they're allowed to jump off of. It's really exciting, and it's really fun to be working with the U.S. team and the international body. But one of the problems of living in this mine town is that all the philanthropy was owned by East companies that owned the mines. And so there's no Rockefellers from this family. There's no Fords from so Ironwood has no alumni with deep pockets that have that Ironwood in its soul. It's all working class people, because all the mining money went out to the East Coast. And so fundraising, we can raise $1 million or $2 million, maybe, $50 at a time, but this needs a lot more than that. And that's one of the difficulties in this somewhat poor community, and who's already been asked to run, help support the cross-country ski races and the film festival and the music festival and all that other stuff. So we need outside help, and that's what and it's possible that the state of Michigan will be helping us soon, and I'm very excited about that. So thanks for asking.
That's awesome. I know you've really poured yourself into it, and that's very important to the community and all the people there, Bob. Let's shift gears one more time. Bob, we're going to go a little bit personal on you, if that's okay with you. We want to learn just a little bit more. And folks, our very special guest today is Bob Jacquart, and he has given so much wisdom and knowledge to all of us, anyone who's thinking about business or who's been in business. But let's talk about you a little bit. This is called our Packed Questions segment. Bob, what's your favorite hobby outside of work?
Cycling, for sure.
You really got into that,
I used to
didn't
be
you?
I used to be a marathon runner. I ran the first 3 grandma's marathons. I was close to being one of the good ones, but not quite, in that next tier down, and then got some damaged knees. But I'm going to be 70 this year, but I will ride my bike from Stillwater, Minnesota, the first Green Bay Packer game across the state of Wisconsin, like I do every year. In the last few years, I took on strength training. My goal is to be physically fit until I'm 100, and not let myself get to be an old man. And it's really a passion. I eat. People will say I'm the healthiest eater they know, and I just feed myself to make sure I stay as healthy as I possibly can be. And I've been very fortunate. So.
What's your favorite vacation spot, Bob?
Mazatlan, Mexico, where I went because I didn't know anywhere else to go, and I fell in love with the Hispanic people. Denise and I have 2 godchildren there. We have 3 families that we support. And we're going there in 2 weeks. Go there. It's a Mexican town that's not like Cancun, where it's a big party. It's kind of right in the middle of the Mexican people, and if you teach yourself Spanish and can speak with them, you meet some. I find their culture very enduring because of how very, very content they are with so little. They're very happy with nothing.
That is so great, Bob. And the last packed question is, what's the best piece of life advice you ever received? You may have hinted to this earlier.
Well, there's a couple of them, Tom, and one of them, I think, if we're talking about life, business, or whatever, I remember I had to buy $30,000 worth of sewing machines to start making those 800 gun cases. And there's a guy in town that is very, very, very successful, and he's got a lumber business and a logging business and just a lot of businesses. And I called him and said, "Can I buy you lunch? I got to ask a question." And I said, "How do you make a big decision? I've got this $30,000 decision, which is, back then it was bigger than life to me." And, and he says, "Bob, I don't have any education, and I'm a very, very simple man. And here's the way I look at it. 2 years from now, how much can you sell those $30,000 worth of machines for?" And I said, I did some calculation, how much, the fair market value and all that stuff. And I says, probably 24. So he says, "Okay, this is a $6,000 decision then, right?" And I go, "I guess so." And he says, he says, "I don't know anything about you, but you have to look at yourself and say, can you afford to lose $6,000? And if you can, just do it. Simple as that. And you have no idea how I've looked at those things. Make a decision. What's the worst that can happen? Can I take that?" And it's been really, really, really great advice, both personally and business-wise. If you really look at it, what is the worst that can happen? And then just say, okay, if the worst happens, can I handle it? And if you can, do it. If you can't, don't.
That's great advice for all of us. And earlier you were talking about balance sheets. It kind of falls right into your balance sheet conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, Bob, we cannot thank you enough. Could you give us all of your handles for Stormy Kromer, for Jacquart, so people can follow you? They can look at you on Instagram and Facebook and websites and all of that.
Okay, so we're Jacquarts.com. So our last name, JACQUARTS.com. And then we are StormyKromer.com. StormyKromer. But I don't know. I don't know what our Twitter, I don't know any of that, Tom.
You know what, Bob? I think it's probably at Stormy Kromer and
Probably.
at Jacquart. You know, it's funny because if I get asked that question, I have to think really deep of what ours are because I have no social media.
Yeah, I don't have Twitter or Facebook or anything. I do LinkedIn really a lot, but I just don't. I mean, I'm not saying I won't do that. It just doesn't appeal to me that much to be doing that. So, yeah.
Well, you have really talented people that can do that. So,
yeah.
Bob, thank you so much, folks. This has been a really special guest of ours and a friend of mine, Bob Jacquart from Jacquart Fabric Products and Stormy Kromer. I'll tell you what, you want to talk about knowledge, you want to talk about wisdom, and one great human being. It's Bob Jacquart. Bob, thank you so much.
Tom, this was a lot of fun. It really was more fun than I even thought. So thanks for offering to take me on. It was really fun.
Thank you for being here, Bob. And folks, until next time, unplug from the indoors and recharge in the outdoors. Doors.